So with this reading, it concludes Shemot, Exodus. But before we get into Vayikra, Leviticus, we have some work to do. Without reading line by line, I'd like to attempt to capture the incredible detail that our Father in heaven requires of his people in order to create a space for him in this world. And furthermore, what it also in turn means for us. Because just as he creates a space for us in this world, we must create a space for him in this world. And coupled with this, I'd like to also share my own personal experience and journey that has shown me just how elaborate this God of Abraham, Isaac can be. And dealing with not just my life, but your lives as well. And I'm hoping we can kind of experience this together, and I'm going to try to bring in my personal experience into this. And so anyway, just come with me. Let's do this. So Shemot 35, Exodus 35, malacha, labor is the word that I was trying to speak of. And on 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day you shall have a Shabbat of complete rest. It is holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. That comes from Exodus 35:2. Immediately after, Moshe begins to tell the people God's instructions for bringing the materials and the construction of the Mishkan. You guys know what the Mishkan is. It's the word that we get for the temple, the tabernacle, but Mishkan is the word that you're supposed to say. It's just, I don't know where we get tabernacle from. Side note, this is actually where we get the template for everything that we should and shouldn't do on Shabbat. This is where the Jewish people get this template from. How you know what you shouldn't be doing on Shabbat, they pretty much draw that directly from every process that's taken in the construction of the Holy Temple. And you're going to see why this is so important to us in our lives, because it has everything to do with building a place for God in this world, and exactly in reflection of what he's doing for us. So let me recite Genesis for you, because this is where it all begins. So to understand what God is doing here and why he acquaints us with the Shabbat, like almost immediately, he starts off with the Shabbat, and then he gets into the whole construction of the Holy Temple. And to understand this, you actually need to go right back to Genesis, to the very original Shabbat. So let me take a moment to do that. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Ve'haaretz hayeta tohu ve'vohu. Ve'choshech al pnei tehom. Ve'ruach Elohim marachefet al pnei hamayim. In the beginning, Elohim created hashamayim and haaretz, the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And a ruach, a wind from Elohim, hovered upon the face of the waters. I can stop right there. Immediately. So after this, and it brings you all the way to where he rested on the seventh day, and after creating the world in 6 days. And that act of creation is what I'm really trying to get at here. That act of creation changed everything, didn't it? Well, technically, before there was nothing, and then there was everything. And I should credit David Rabbi Foreman is where I'm going to be drawing some of these insights in. So, but back to what I was saying. Before there was nothing, and then there was everything. But that's not exactly true. That's only true from our perspective. You see, in our perspective, there was nothing, and then there was everything. There was the stars, the skies, and everything that we would come to know. But from God's perspective, there already was everything. He was doing just fine in his heavenly realm, wherever that is. So he literally has to carve out a space for us. So from God's perspective, that doesn't really work. So yes, if you are man, then there was nothing, and then there was the stars, the universe, the sky, the land, the sea, etc. But for God, that's not true. Before creation, God was already living in his own tremendous realm, just like I already said. And if anything, creation didn't make everything. It was more of a diminishment of the world that he already knew. So why would he do this? He does it for the same reason that you and I have children. He did it out of love. This very same process is very much akin to the way that we have a child. Think about this. In your body, all your organs serve for you, 100% of them, except the womb. The womb itself is there to completely just for something else other than you. The womb is the one place in the body that, strangely, isn't even there for yourself. The womb is there for creation. It's an environment perfectly calibrated to nourish that being that you want to create. It was during this study, actually, when I was really hit with the idea, because I've always said it before, the women seem to have this like supernatural connection to the Almighty. And then not only just that, it's connection to his heart. And I always wanted to know, I just accepted that for what it was at face value, but then it come to realize as I was beginning to study this, that womb makes them so unique because they understand this idea of creation. They understand this part of having something in them that doesn't even serve them, but it just is meant for something else entirely, just like God does with creation. And that's when I began to understand. That's why when I was trying to study something once and I was trying to convey this idea, my wife jumps up and says, "Why do you keep thinking this has anything to do with you?" And that just stalled me out right there. I mean, all this deep thinking and everything, and meanwhile, all I had to stop and think about it was that it has nothing to do with me. It's all about giving. It's all about somebody else. When you live your life for something else, that's why the mother will do things that just supersede what a man will rationally go to. So, anyway, women are amazing. That's the main point. Yeah, that's good. But so back to God. Why would God carve out a space, a womb of sorts, in this world? He did it because he wanted to create a being possessed of free will, something that he could have a relationship with. And that being couldn't exist in God's world. We couldn't exist in God's world. It had to have a world of its own. That being had to have a world of its own. So in 6 days, when God went about creating a world and an environment that required time and space itself, do you realize God doesn't require time and space at all? These are constructs that he doesn't even have to live in. He created an environment that would require perfectly calibrated laws and physics, nuclear strong forces in perfect ratio with nuclear weak forces. The laws of thermodynamics and these laws were all held in perfect balance in order to make our environment work. See, God doesn't need any of that, but he does it all out of love. He pays special attention to the laws of physics, planets, stars, because that being that he loves requires it all to exist. And on the 6th day, let me go to that. Coming out of Genesis 1:27. It says, Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam B'Tselem Elohim. Pay attention to that B'Tselem Elohim. That will come up again. Bara oto zachar u'nkeva bara otam. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he, him, male and female, he created them. The whole time, he creates this being to be like him he's creating a being that is like him in a sort of way. The whole time God is creating this environment for his creation, he gives this creation the power to create. In one instant, God creates everything, then spends 6 days molding and shaping it. The practice of malacha, labor. In the very same way, man can adapt his own environment to meet his desires. Look at anybody that's moved into the woods and turns these amazing, they're making shows about this now. In fact, man's destiny is to do exactly what God did. Look at the center of the Torah itself. We have the last half of the book of Exodus, the first half of the book of Numbers, and the entire book of Leviticus, it's all about man creating a version of what God created. First, there was everything. Then God says, I will create a space for the one that I love. Now mankind does the very same thing. Man says, now I will carve out a space for the one that I love in this world. When we see them putting together the Mishkan, the holy temple, the tabernacle, this is exactly what they're doing. It requires special details that have nothing to do with me, but everything to do with him. I'm going to observe these laws of purity and impurity, laws of holy and unholy. I'm going to do everything the way that he wants it because we love God. Because we want an environment to work for God and for him to inhabit that place, the one that we love. So just as he observes the laws of physics and etc., we observe his laws in constructing the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And just as we are creating the Mishkan, God introduces us to the Shabbat. Just as God rested after all the malacha, the labor, creating a place for us, likewise, we rest from all the malacha we do in building a place for God. It's fascinating how we are put in the position of creating. In fact, who builds the Mishkan? Do you guys remember his name? Betzalel. Now, if Betzalel were an acronym, it would be B'Tselem Elohim, coming again from Genesis 1:27, in the image of God. Betzalel represents all of us in attaining our collective potential, in creating a space for God in this world and in our lives for the one that we love. Like Betzalel, we must carve out a space in our lives that serves no other purpose than for bringing God into this world. Before I share my own personal experience on my journey, I got a great story about meeting my parents, and I'm really chomping at the bit to tell you guys about this, but I really want to make sure that I lay somewhat of a foundation here before I set a roof. So before I share that, I need to hit a little closer to home. I'm learning more than ever that worship and religious lifestyle needs to be a home-based operation, a home-based system, where God is involved in every aspect of our lives. Our children will see the difference between who we are at home and who we are in our places of worship. I'm always asking myself, do the kids see a hypocrite? Does my son see a hypocrite? Thinking about the Friday night custom of sanctifying the Shabbat day, it's kind of a microcosm of the building of the Mishkan. It represents God's presence to us, as the Mishkan does. The candles on our table remind us of the menorah. The challah bread speaks of the bread of presence inside the Mishkan. The wine of the daily libation. And the festival meal of the Shabbat double offering portion. And the prayers that we say, they remind us of the altar of incense. Shabbat is a home-based service, officiated by the Father as the priest for the congregation, composed of direct family and friends. Friday night, it is customary for the husband to give an ode to his wife using Proverbs 31. The wife does the same thing for her husband, and they both bless the children. You see, it's that process that sanctifies the Shabbat. The Shabbat service, what we do here is beautiful and amazing, but it can never replace what happens at home. It's the home-based service and worship that will sanctify the Shabbat. Now, as for my story, as I shared with you guys before, I'm going to try to create some kind of an order here, but I have a feeling I'm just going to go way out. I have to say first, though, I am simply amazed at the level of special detail that God will pay attention to in order to establish a place for us in this world. On a very individual level, he'll establish this in our lives. And if we're paying attention, which I hope we are when we don't miss it. You see, I was adopted at birth. I learned that before my birth mother took a moment to give me away, she took a moment to see me one last time. This was powerful to me as I was talking to my mother, my own birth mother, and I will explain how this even come about. But she tells me over the phone, she says, honey, there was a moment there where I was coming out of some of the anesthesia, and I said, can I see my son one moment? And she already knew. It was already decided I was going to be adopted out. And she looks at me and she goes, it's weird for them to open their eyes like right away. But she goes, usually they have dark eyes or blue eyes, but your eyes were bright green from the moment you were born. And she said, I remember just staring into your eyes, and I saw in my own heart's mind, eye, however you want to say that, an image of what you would look like as a young man. And she goes, that gave me such wonderful peace to know that. And then I was adopted out. I was taken back home to Illinois. I was raised by parents who loved me. And I grew up, and, I had siblings. I had a support base. But always, even though my adopted mother took time to make sure that I understood what it was to be adopted out. I understood that I came from somebody, that she just made sure I got it. And then, but for so long, I would see myself growing up alongside my siblings and in my house, and how I really wasn't like any of them. I mean, it makes sense, right? But man, it was just like this crazy longing to find something that resembled me. I don't know why that got so intense. And maybe if you guys are adopted, maybe you would understand that. Maybe you could help me understand that, but it was just a dire longing. But through all of that, I would go on through life, and I would go through stages during my teenage years that I would find I was ridiculing my dad because I didn't know anything about him. I wasn't even told about him. All I had was this piece of paper that said, your mother looked like this and was about this height and about this weight and this color eyes, hair, all that. But that was all that I knew of her. So that was the only image I had. And then what I was told was that they were very young and they were teenagers and there was a split and they never saw each other again. And so in a way, I always grew up, as much as I was longing for my father, I despised him all at the same time. And I don't know if that even makes sense, but that's the way I felt. And so, but I always hung on to this image of my mother. It was just a paper that I hung on to for so long, and I always thought that would be the one that I saw first. And then over time, there would be quite a few attempts to trying to find them, but it never seemed like the right moment. I remember as a teenager, I began looking online, and I didn't know how to even go about that. And then right away, some type of attorney service called me up, and I could hire him for, I think it was $2,000 at the time. And at that time, I wasn't ready for that yet. So it just didn't seem right. And it just seemed like no matter how many times I would try to find my parents over the years, it just didn't seem like the right time. Until one day, I find myself, I'm married, and I have children, and I find that I'm approaching my 40th birthday. And all of a sudden, my wife is given like this just like supernatural charge to try to help me. And it was more important to her than me at the moment because I was already discarding this. And all the meanwhile, like I said before, I'm dealing with this feeling of like just I don't fit anywhere. And then those of you who know Vicky knows that she's pretty supercharged. Once there's a certain idea in her head, there's pretty much nothing stopping her. I don't know if you guys, if you get to know her, yeah. But that definitely put the process in fast gear. And within no time, I find I'm actually making contact with both my father and my mother. At the age of 40. Quite literally, by the time I was going down there, I had just turned 40 years old. Now it's fascinating to me how 40 years appears in the text, how often 40 years appears into the text. And I only pulled out a few of them, but there's actually quite a few. And typically, it's represented by testing and trial and probation. So, these aren't good connotations, but there's a lot of good that comes from this, which kind of makes sense in my own life. And just to capture a few notable times in the text, during Moses' life, he lived 40 years in Egypt and 40 years in the desert before being selected by God to lead his people out of slavery. So 40 years in Egypt and then 40 years in the desert before he was selected by God. B'nai Israel, children of Israel, wandered 40 years in the desert. Yeshua fasting 40 days in the wilderness, being tempted. And the list goes on. But the first I was to contact would be my father. And I thought that would be the hardest because I didn't like this guy and I didn't even know him. And I remember there was an instant message, and then he gets back to me a long time later, and I kind of just spelled it out in the message. And I remember showing them. She was like, "What did you send him?" And I said, "I sent him this." And she was like, "Dear God, why would you send those words?" And it was just like, it would have freaked any person out. And but it took a while, but he contacted me. And then he goes, "Can we talk?" And then I was terrified, and I just kind of tapped in yes. And then within seconds, he was already calling me. And I remember all that animosity I had towards this man I never knew. And I'm telling you, I cursed him, I hated him, and I had no idea why. All the meanwhile, I really believed that it was just masking a true longing for a father. You guys have no idea how impacting your fathers are. And then I hear his words, and just the tone of the subtle tones in his voice washed away all kinds of hate. And the more he talked, the anger turned to nothing. And all of a sudden, I'm this little boy all over again, listening to my daddy for the first time. And then I started to get it. Everybody says, they always refer to our Father in heaven. They'll say Abba or Daddy or anything like that. And I never got that. It immediately threw up a wall. And then all of a sudden it made sense. I'm talking to my daddy right now, and I'm this little boy all over again. It didn't matter that I was 40 years old. I was a little kid at this moment. And I'm excited. And I'm getting misty-eyed just sitting here listening to his words. There's nothing that helps me understand that. Years of frustration gone in an instant, just hearing my dad's voice. In no time, he buys a ticket for me to come fly out there and visit him. And that was just before I mentioned to you guys a few weeks back. Now, in that time of waiting, I actually make contact with my mother. It was just searching around on Facebook. I knew the name. I just had no idea where she was. And then suddenly we find something that it just felt like the right thing. And even Vicki pointed it out. She was like, I think this is her. And I took a snapshot of it, and I sent a picture over to him. And within seconds, he goes, "I am 100% sure that's your mother." And I'm freaked out, And so I immediately make contact, and it was the same thing. And Vicki's like, "Why do you send this stuff? My God, can you find a nicer, smoother way to do it?" And I was like, "I don't know, I was just nervous." And it took a while. And then she was like, "Maybe the siblings. Try it. You've got 2 sisters. I got 2 amazing sisters." And so I shoot a message to them, and they contact me immediately. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to them. They're like, "Your mother has been dying to find you. We pray about you so often, Michael." She was like, "I can't believe I'm even talking to you right now because this has been a long time. I've been looking for you since we were teenagers." And then to find out that my mom was longing for me and missed me and cried for me so often. And every year around my birthday, it was always a down time, but it was also a time that the family came together and prayed. And then I would finally make contact with her. She finally contacted me. And the same way, in a second, it washed away everything bad that ever happened to me, any animosity I had. And I didn't really have much against her because I really longed for her, but I just had issues. And then all of a sudden, the more she talked, the more it just washed all that away. And I I can't understand that, but there is something that a mother's words where you recognize it in your, like every cell in your DNA recognizes this, and it recognizes her tone. I swear it would have been like she was singing to me all these years, and I finally got to hear that, and I go, I know where that came from. That's how weird it was for me, but it was powerful. And I couldn't help but cry as I'm sitting there listening to her. And then finally she does a face-to-face, like a FaceTime, or yeah. And I can't even believe it. I'm looking at my mom, and she's just beaming with pride. And she looks so much like me, and she's like short like I am. That was the other frustrating thing. I found out my brothers were all like taller, buffer versions of me. And my dad, he's like way buffer than I am. It's so crazy. I'm like the runt of the whole bunch, but I'm older than all of them. But it was amazing. And then, and it just so happened to work that I was going to, on this trip, that I was going to take out to Henderson, Nevada. That's where they're living. My mother lives in Arizona. My dad lives in Nevada. And I got to go out and see them, but it just so happened to work out that I could spend almost the same amount of days with both of them. That was so moving to me. And as I got to speak with them, and as I got to, the excitement is there, but it's not hitting you yet. Like you don't believe you're standing before your dad. That you've never known him all your life, 40 years. You never met this guy, and then all of a sudden it happens in the most simple conversation. I'm standing in his kitchen. I'm talking to him and his wife, who just she just immediately was calling me son, and I thought that was powerful and beautiful. But they're talking to me, and all of a sudden I'm trying to just share about something simple, and all of a sudden I can't breathe. I'm overwhelmed. I can't talk. I can't speak, and I'm like this little kid, and I just started opening up my hands, and immediately they just engulfed me, and just with this amazing hug. And those of you who know my story about that suicide attempt, that attempt on my life, that was the moment that I felt the Almighty embrace me. And there's nothing like that in this world. And up until then, I only knew it on a spiritual level. I had a sense of what it was to be held and loved by something that you come from. And then my father's holding me like this, and I can't stop crying. I can't speak. And all I needed was that. My gosh, I didn't realize that it could immediately wash away all the pain in one embrace. Fathers, I'm talking to myself too. Love and hug your children. Let them know that they're not alone, that there is a place for them in this world, that everything about me, that was the most amazing thing. Everything about me that I was insecure about, my personality, the things I was interested in, and even down to the hobbies and stuff like that, all came from him and my mother. But right now, just talking about my dad, everything about that was what made him successful in the world. My dad is a crazy success right now, and he's doing amazing with his family, and he's doing amazing in the work field, and he's using everything that I thought was useless. I thought my personality would never work in this world, and I saw a man who does nothing more than just lift people up and tell them, because he can look at you and tell you what makes you so amazing. And he builds up an entire workforce. He's got people surrounding him who totally know that this guy loves and believes in them, and they would follow him to the ends of the world. And I find that powerful, because I never thought that would work. In my field, everyone's a big jerk, and the biggest jerk gets to run the show. I saw something completely different. I couldn't believe it. It was everything that I would ever need to be successful in this world. And it doesn't mean necessarily just business, but it means life, because God made me that way. My Father in heaven established him to show me the way. And in 1 second, he just healed everything in one strong embrace. I love that. I love the fact that when I finally got to meet my mother, the same scenario. Here I was standing before my sisters, who are like, they are, to best explain them, if you took the most dominant, best parts of my personality and you just split them into two people, you would have them. They were just awesome. And it was just amazing to see that. And they were kind of short like I am too. I don't know if this, when you guys see me on live like this, I don't know if you can tell how short I am, but most of these guys really do. And but it was wonderful to me to see and recognize them. It was, again, like even the tones in their voices and just being close to me, you just felt this immediate connection in your chest. This is something I can only, I don't have anything to help me understand this other than the fact that, I guess that's what you siblings, what you feel like when you love your brothers and sisters. And when you get around them, you just know. There's just stuff you know about them. You sense it. You feel it. And that's exactly what I was experiencing this entire time. And the more they talked, I'm sitting there with my sisters and my mom, and I'm just trying to share things in my life. And then I start talking about more personal issues and the way I was feeling over the years and how much I just wanted to meet. I wanted to know my mom. And not that my adopted parents did a bad job at all. But there was something there that only she could give me. And as I'm sitting there talking to her, this same process. I'm sitting at a table, and all I'm trying to do is tell a story about my life, and all of a sudden I can't breathe again. And I'm like, they know it immediately, and all of a sudden it was like, sister, mom, and it was just there all around me, and I could not imagine. I was brought back to that moment where I tried to take and I don't like using that, but that moment where I tried to take my life, and God embraced me. My Abba, my Father embraced me, and now it's my mother and my sisters. And guys, there is nothing like that in this world that I can relate that to. I love my mom, and I love my father, and I've got amazing siblings. And it's so wild to see, like, here I am, and they're all these parts of me. I've got 3 sisters and a brother, if you go on both sides of the family, and they are all like parts of me. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I wrote a lot of notes, and I don't know why. You know, it's powerful to me that when I met my father, I could see plainly that Abba had taken him from what was once a misguided teenager and molded and shaped him over the years into becoming the kind of man that I would only hope to be. I hope I become that for my son and his men, fathers. I hope you desire that to be for the people around you, that when young men look up to you and other people look to you or your children look to you, they see the kind of man they want to be one day. I don't know how to explain that anymore. I discovered with my mother that I had an amazing heritage. It doesn't make sense that some kid growing up in a completely different environment, nowhere near his family, would find himself on the very path that her people come from. It's the reason I started studying Hebrew. It's the reason that I would never be able to take anything less than a Hebraic Jewish approach to the Bible, to the text, to our Messiah. Nothing else would ever do, and now I understand why. That is mind-blowing to me. How does your heritage call out? But each of us, we have something like that. We have a legacy to pass on down to our children. And it goes beyond anything we can understand in the physical. My mother, she's as deep and loving as it gets. When she speaks, she talks to your soul. I want to really capture that because when she talks to people, the rooms get quiet. And as she looks in you, you can just feel it. She's talking to your heart. And she does it with everyone. And she works as a nurse. And I don't even know how she's hung on to the compassion because at the hospital where she works, death is like daily around there, trying to revive people. It's an amazing thing, and yet she still is moved to show them the love of our Master, Yeshua the Messiah. It never stops in her. And I find that powerful. It's no different from my dad. He lives to show people what being a believer looks like. He's never preached to anyone, but he does it with his life. And by the time you begin to ask him, He's already shown you all the groundwork that you need to understand. I find that powerful. After spending time with both my mother and my father, I understood no matter how long it's been, healing is always possible. And you know what else? I already said that. I have brothers and sisters that are among the most incredible people that I've ever met. And not just because they look, act, and even sound like me, but because each one of them is like a concentrated doses of my character and my personality. Like seeing me divided into 4 parts. The best part of all this is that all the tears and the emotions I was having that feels like an incomplete idea. You know what? That's probably one of the main points there is that Vicky's always told me that she was like, Mike, half the time I don't even know if you're having a good time. You kind of fly on a neutral, where you're not really expressionative about your emotions. And I don't know what happened out there, but something knocked a screw loose, so to speak. I'm emotional about everything now. I saw that my father, he leads with compassion and heart, and he gets misty-eyed and he cries over the silliest things, but he does it with raw passion. And that's always been a part of me, and I've never been able to just let go of that because that's not the way it is normally. It definitely doesn't work in my environment. But I wonder if I helped those people around me believe in who they are, I wonder if I would have people, if I'm already equipped to run work, to be the leader that I was always supposed to be. I wonder that. I'm willing to put it into action. And to think all of this is just the beginning. It was hard to come back home, but it also made coming back home that much sweeter. I was coming back home with a new life. I've returned home with a vision and a purpose, where before it didn't seem there was one. So to bring these great beginnings and a message to a close, I'm brought to a place of total awe and the level of malacha, labor, that our Father wants to establish in each one of our lives. That our Master, my Abba, will go through in order to create a space just for me in this world and just for you. So I understand more than ever why it's important to create a space, to carve out, to do our own malacha for Him in this world. I understand that more than ever. Why would not? Well, more than ever in our lives, we need to do this. We need to be people who are willing to carve out a space for our Father in this world because He's so willing to do so much for us. But those around us, they won't know if we never take the time to carve out a space for the King of Kings in this world. Coming from a verse out of Lamentations 5:21. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva chadash yameinu kekadem. Turn to us, O Lord, and we shall be turned. Renew our days as of old. Yes, what I'm saying here is renew that passion. Renew that excitement when God manifested on the earth and the people were driven to want to play their part in building the holy Mishkan, to bring what they had, to labor what they needed to labor, anything, because now they were acquainted with the God of God, the King of Kings, the beginning and the end, right there. Inspire us to do just that in our lives, Abba. I ask that each of us would even approach this day differently. I think it's fitting to close with the Aaronic blessing. David does it beautifully, but I've learned that it's very important to, when you're put in the position to bless, when it's your turn. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha Yair Adonai panav Elecha v'kunecha Yisa Adonai panav elecha Ve'asim lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. The Lord be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you each shalom. Shabbat shalom, guys. Have a great Shabbat and love you guys.
Hello everyone, Pastor David here. I hope you enjoyed the message this week. If you would like to see more messages, please go to Freedom Hill's YouTube page and join there, subscribe there, and you will see an assortment of teachings, devotionals, all kinds of great media that will help you and your family to do this thing called life, to live it in His ways and in His truth. Also, if these messages have blessed you and you would like to partner with us, you can go to our website and you will see the links where you can actually donate to help us get this word out to everyone. So I hope you have a wonderful week and we'll see you next weekend. Shalom.